this episode of the Martial Truth podcast, my interview with Mario McKenna. Mario McKenna has done tremendous work for guys like me, meaning that he's translated a bunch of books. Okay, here's Taira Shinken's book. We also have his new one that may not be out yet, but I read it. Excellent. It'll be out soon. Okay, highly recommend. Go and get it. My personal favorite, the Morinobu book, Ittoman, right? Excellent. Highly recommend all of these. He's another book by Mario. And then also another one of my favorites, an overview of Karate Do. Okay. He has several others. Many of them are available on Lulu. So you can go purchase them at Lulu. Again, he's done tremendous work translating all these works. And for a guy like me, that's much appreciated. So hope you enjoy the interview with him. As always, please click that like, share, and subscribe button. All right. Consider becoming a monthly member. Again, I'll be in New York next week teaching seminars. I'll put the info in the description. We have a lot of people coming, so we have a pretty good turnout for that seminar. I hope to see some people there, that I haven't met before. It'd be nice to see some new people, new faces. All right. So keep that in mind. And without further ado, here's my interview with Mario McKenna. Oh, Mario McKenna, welcome to the Martial Truth podcast.
Well, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, maybe you could give people some of your background. I mean, obviously, I'm aware of you and know all your good deeds, but maybe you could explain to some of the viewers exactly who you are and what you
Okay.
do.
What I do? Sure. I'll try to make it short. And, you can always play it back if you suffer from insomnia. That's always a good start. My name is Mario McKenna, originally from Belfast, Northern Ireland. I was born there. Moved to Canada when I was around 8 or 9. Ended up in Alberta, Canada, in a town called Lethbridge, and then started my first karate experience within Shotokan when I was in the 10th grade. Lasted maybe 3-4 months, and then it was run by an RCMP, and
Okay.
that gentleman got transferred, and then the club tried to go, but there was no one senior enough to kind of keep it going, so it just kind of collapsed. And then asking around, some of my seniors in that dojo said, "Oh, there's some Okinawan Goju in the city, but you don't want to check that out because it's really primitive." That was their descriptor to me, and I was like, "Oh, okay." But this club was kind of just collapsing in on itself. So I went over, and then there was a Okinawan gentleman named Kinjo Yoshitaka, Taka Kinjo, he goes by, and he'd been teaching Goju. I should more specifically say he was teaching Gohaku Ryu, right?
Okay.
He was a student of Tokashiki again.
Okay.
So I started learning under him, although he really focused on the Goju. Almost 95% of the class was
Okay.
Goju. And yeah, I was there until graduated university, and then I went off to grad school, and then didn't do anything for about 2 years. And then after grad school, ended up in Japan for almost 9 years.
Okay. And what'd you do in Japan?
Initially did on the JET program teaching English.
Okay.
And I did my stint there for like 3 years and some change, and then stayed on because I had gotten married by then.
Okay. So are you
And
married to a Japanese woman?
yep,
Okay.
yep, she lets me know. I hope you're not listening to this. And then after that, I worked for Mitsubishi Heavy Industries
Okay.
and Human Resources Department for a couple of years.
Okay.
And at the same time was pursuing my love and passion for all things Okinawan and martial related. Yeah,
Okay.
while I lived in Japan. Got to meet some great people while I was there, like Joe Swift, and later met Patrick McCarthy, and just a whole slew of non-Japanese and Japanese instructors, which really influenced me.
So did you train while you were in Japan?
Yeah, so when I first started on the JEP program, on the application you're allowed to list where you want to go. So I
Okay.
wrote Okinawa, right?
Okay.
I think I just wrote Okinawa, Okinawa, Okinawa. That was my 3 choices. And then when I got my posting, it said you're going to Amami Oshima, and I went, "Is that part of Okinawa?" And then I looked on the map around Okinawa and I couldn't find it. And then I finally started going north, and then it's between the mainland and Okinawa. It's kind of like halfway there.
It's one of the smaller islands.
It's a smaller island, but it actually belongs to Kagoshima Prefecture, not
Okay.
Okinawa.
Okay.
Although it was part of the Ryukyu Kingdom back in the day.
Right.
Anyway, I ended up there, and lo and behold, there was a student of Taira Shinken who lived on the island. His name was Minoa Katsuhiko, and I went there through the introduction of a teacher, and he told me to get lost. I was like, great, this is a great start because I couldn't speak a lick of Japanese, like
Right.
nothing,
Right.
nothing. And he didn't speak any English. He just said, go away.
Right.
And I came back, and then he said, okay, fine. And I did Kabuto with him for like 3.5 years and his senior student, uh, Taira lineage stuff. And he was also a Weichi teacher. So
Okay.
he insisted that I learn Weichi.
Okay.
I said no.
Okay.
He kept bugging me. I kept it up for about, I think maybe 3 or 4 months. I just kept saying no, no, no. And he finally just said, you know what? I don't care if you ever practice Weichi again, but it'd be good for you to learn. And I couldn't argue with that logic.
Right.
I was like, oh, okay, sure. Yeah. And I just was basically beaten and abused for 3 years. Those guys are so tough and so strong.
Yeah.
So
It's one of the things. I mean, I like Wichiru. I think there's a lot of good things there, but I think there's a little too much heavy reliance on the body conditioning.
yes, I would agree.
It's just and like I see some of the senior guys, their fingers are all deformed from doing things.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I just again for myself, I was a police officer for 22 years, so
Wow.
I have a lot of real fighting experience,
Hmm.
and uh, I've never felt that my fingers needed to be conditioned for fighting. And I hit plenty of people in the throat with a finger strike, no problem, right?
Yeah.
Never hurt my
Hmm.
fingers. And I see these guys breaking 3 boards, and I say to myself, well, that's great. I mean, that's great because I could never do that.
Hmm.
I don't want to hurt my fingers. But it is true. I do see that. That's one of the things I find that in modern times, they ought to back off that stuff a little bit. I just don't think it's not as necessary in modern times.
It's yeah, to each his own.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
and again, I God bless you. Whatever makes you happy. I mean, I say
yeah,
that all the time on this channel. If something makes you happy, do it.
do it.
It's just something that I observe. And then studying some Chinese arts, my Chinese masters all say, don't do anything that causes harm to the body.
Mm, mm,
So if you're doing something that it's causing you injury, don't do that.
yeah.
It's not a good practice. So,
Well,
but
so I had 3 years of daily injury. It was just I don't think I ever got stronger. It was
okay.
just so painful.
So that's great.
So,
You did
but
the Taira Kobudo though.
yeah, and I still do it to this day. I've
Oh, that's great.
when my teacher passed away in 2003, and then I just followed his senior student on the island,
Okay.
Yoshimura Sensei. So I've been doing it since '94.
So in Ishinru, we have a bunch of Taira lineage Kobudo.
Hmm. Yeah.
And it's interesting. When I was just in Okinawa, I was sitting down talking to my teacher, Kichiro Shimabuku. And
Hmm.
again, sometimes it seems like such a simple question, but you've never thought to ask it.
Exactly. Yep.
So, I've had a couple of those things in the last couple of years with him. And so I said to him, I said, hey, Sensei, did you train with Taira Sensei too? And he looks at me and he looks at me almost
You're like,
like you're an idiot. Like,
yeah.
yeah. He goes, yeah, right. And then I realized, I said, yeah, well, obviously that was later on in Tatsuo's thing, And I have spoken to some Marines, like Sherman Harrell didn't know it at the time, but Sherman Harrell and 2 other Marines were creating a demo, a bow side demo for a
Yeah.
wedding demonstration they were going to do.
Yeah.
And he goes, this Okinawan gentleman was there, and he was with Tatsuo, and he heard Tatsuo calling him sensei. So they said they heard that, and they were like, okay, this guy must be somebody.
Yeah.
But again, he goes, Mike, we're 17-year-old Marines. We're
Yeah.
not asking who
Yeah.
it is. We're not saying anything. But as the guy leaves, he stops, he watches up for a second and goes, good, good, and walks out. So Sherman Harrell says, years later, I see a picture of Taira Shinken. He says, and I go, holy shit.
That's the
That was
guy.
Taira Shinken that told us good. That's why Tatsuo was calling him sensei. And I always thought it was just kind of a cool story, that they didn't even realize who the guy was. And meanwhile, it's Taira Shinken, right? And
Yeah,
so for me, is again, it's a moment when I ask my teacher, and he looks at me like, "Yeah, of course I was there. I was with my father. Of course I was learning
of course
from him
there.
too. We're all there in the dojo. So just interesting. And but yeah, and like I've discussed this with some other guys, not just Ishinru guys either. Like the kata we do are amongst some of the harder ones.
Yeah, you guys do all the high level ones.
Yeah. So like
Like you guys do Soeishi no Kon. I'm like, whoa, that's way up in the pay scale for us.
yeah, and Andres was telling me that they kind of some of the Ryukyu groups kind of lost that form because it
Yeah.
wasn't being practiced. They just didn't have enough senior people that got reached that point. And it kind of got a little fugazi. I mean, I don't know if
Yep.
you. And he said to me, he says, "You guys in Ishinru have always been practicing it. Like you have the
Yeah.
founder on film." And again, of course, look, there's going to be variations. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
There's variations in everything,
A
right?
variations of variations.
Yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, like I mean, like I teach Mariyoshi Kobudo, so I've got like
Mhm.
students here that are already, they've got two Bokata, but they also do Ishinru, and then they're not near the Ishinru Kobudo yet. And then
Yeah.
when I start teaching them Tokumini no Kun, the first Ishinru Bokata, they're like, wait a second, this is really hard. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm like
These are really hard.
the Mariyoshi Bokata, a little easier in certain respects. Some are hard, but a couple, they're kind of easier, right? And then
Yeah.
when I show them Urashi, we
Yeah.
call it Urashi, they're
Mhm.
like, and then Shishi, Shishi
Yeah.
no Kun. I mean, they're like, that whole thing is one kata? Like that's one kata. And I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah. And it's
Yeah.
really
It's
hard.
the go get a coffee kata. You can make a cup
Yeah.
of coffee and come back.
I did that kata at a tournament. Nick Adler used to have these tournaments out in Long Island, samurai spirit tournaments, and it was
Hmm.
only traditional karate and kobudo. So
Hmm.
I did that one time at one of those tournaments, and a Shorinru guy, I think I took third place. I didn't do a lot of tournaments, but I think that day I must have gotten lucky. So I took third place. And the Shorinru guy goes to hand me the trophy, and he leans into me and he says, "How do you remember that effing kata?" That's literally what he said to me. And I was like,
Yeah.
I think I know. It's like it's really long and it's
Yeah.
really hard. So
It's the anti-Alzheimer's kata. It's really good
100,
for, keeping
100%.
your memory going.
Well, it's funny. I'm going back to New York in 2 weeks. I do seminars once a year out there. And one of the things that as soon as I get there, my senior guys, I'll say anything you guys want to review, and it's always Shishi no Kun. Let's review Shishi no Kun. We want to make sure we're
Yeah.
not we're not screwing it up too bad. I said, okay, and we go over it.
Yeah, for me, like that's almost like the last Bokata in the curriculum. And I didn't
Okay.
learn that till like 20, I'm gonna say it was like 2017 on my trip to
Okay.
Japan. And I've been
Okay.
doing Kabuto for like 25 years.
Okay.
And I even had to ask my teacher with my like who was my senpai at the time, but now is my teacher's like, hey sensei, is it okay if I learn Soeishi no
Right.
Kon? Like
Right.
I've been doing this for 25 years.
Right.
He's like, and he hums and he haws, and he's like, okay, you're here for 2 weeks, but you got to do it every day. I'm
Well,
like,
you
well,
you
duh, that's
do.
why I'm here.
I mean, the funny thing is he's right because if you don't stay on top of it,
Oh no, you'll
oh
just mess it
boy.
up.
Yeah. I mean, I do it all the time because again, it's the same thing. Like if you don't stay on top of it, and I really like that kata, so it makes
Yeah,
it easy because I want to do it. I like it, right? Um,
yeah.
you know.
But it's interesting you saying like it's funny like some Taira lineage schools have sort of, sorry, we're kind of getting sidetracked
No,
here,
no, that's
but
right.
some
That's right.
Taira lineage schools have, you look at the curriculum of Taira and then they're saying, oh, this kata is lost or we don't do it anymore. And you're like, how can this happen? Like, I don't understand. Like, and that's always kind of perplexed me because I will say one thing about my teacher, Minowa Sensei, he was really good at like, at least to a few students, like passing them all down
Right.
intact
Right.
and, and very, very good about like documentation and video and everything.
Well,
So
it's funny I experienced that with Mariyoshi Kobudo. So Gaki Yoshiaki, everybody's pretty much in agreement that he was Mariyoshi Shimpo's number one student in
yeah,
terms of ability. Might not have been the highest rank, but in terms of ability,
yeah,
you know.
yeah.
Um, and I had him into New York, him and Yogi Yosei Sensei, and I had asked him, could I learn the Sensetsu Kon kata? And I
Okay.
thought he was going to teach me the one that you see Yamashiro always demonstrating, right?
Hmm.
And I start doing that one, and he goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "The Sensetsu Konga."
That's
And,
gone. He's
and
like,
he goes, no. I go, no. He goes, no. He's no. I'm going to show you the one that Mariyoshi Sensei taught me. And okay, and it's very different, right?
yeah.
Um, so I learned that, and then a couple of days later, we were going through all the kata, and it was me and another senior guy, and we got to kama. I hadn't learned the kama. That was the only one I hadn't been taught. And he says, "Okay, kama." So I said, "Oh, Sensei, I don't know it." And he goes, "Kama," right? And I said, "Sensei, I don't know it," right? And I said, "Okay," right? So I grab a pair of kama. The guy I'm with, I look at him. He goes, "I'll go slow. Just follow along." Okay. So I follow along, and he was leaving like 3 days after that, and he was drilling me on the kamakata every day.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then I went to Okinawa in 2010, and I reviewed all the kata with again, which was great because in 2011 he had the stroke.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So I really feel like, again, sometimes I don't know what's in people's heads, but I almost felt like he was really trying to get a handful of us all the kata in the system.
Hmm.
So we had it, and so I always find it interesting because again, once something's lost, it's hard to,
Yeah, it's you hard.
you know.
It's
And I did
you
ask
know what?
Kichiro Shimabuko. I said, "Do you know, did Taira Sensei pick the kata that we do in Ishinru? Did Tatsuo
Oh,
pick the kata that we do in?" I thought that was a good question, and he literally looked at me, and I appreciate an answer like this. He goes, "Mike, I don't know," because he speaks
yeah.
English. He goes, "I don't know.
I don't
I,
know.
I don't
Oh,
know. I'd
okay.
rather him tell me I don't know
Yeah.
than make something up." Right?
Manufacture something. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it's fascinating that Urashi, Shishi, Chatnyara no Sai, Hamahiga no
Hmm.
Tuifa, they're not easy forms. None of them.
No,
You
it's
know.
interesting. Like why? Yeah, why those ones?
Yeah.
It's hard to and it's hard to suss out. It's
And we're never gonna know. I mean, did Tyra demonstrate some bow kata, and Tatsuo went, "Oh, I really like that one," and
can I do
Tyra's
that
like,
one?
"Yeah." Tyra's like, "Okay, right." I mean, I think now we get hung up on, like, even within the Rukyu Kobudo and Mariyoshi too. Oh, you can't learn that kata until you're,
Yeah, I know. I'm
you know.
elderly.
I just went through this. We have the Ishin World Karate Association championships roughly every 2 years. Obviously, with COVID, took a break. And they just had one in Pittsburgh, and one of my students was working Hamahiga, and she wanted to do that at the tournament. And I only had a lot of my students don't go, so she was the only one that showed up to compete, along with my group from London. But they told her you had to be fourth dan to do that kata. So at the time I was ninth dan, and I went up to them and I go, "Since when do you have to be fourth dan to learn that kata?" And they go, "Well, that's an advanced kata." I said, "Really? How's it advanced? Can you explain that to me? How's it more advanced than any of the other Kobudo kata?"
They can't.
And they can't, and it's like they just make these things up, and I got to be honest. I normally teach Hamahiga in my dojo for the Ishinru guys at Shodan.
Hmm.
They make Shodan. They already know a bow kata and a side kata, and I
Yeah,
usually go, "Hey, what do is there something you might like to learn?" And almost everybody says Hamahiga because it's a new weapon, right? They want to learn the new weapon, and I teach
yeah,
that, and then I
yeah.
go on to the other bow and side kata. But yeah, it's very interesting.
It's I might come across as cynical, but it strikes me as kind of almost like a paywall that you have to get to a certain level and a certain pay your dues, and then okay, then you can have it. But
So,
in terms of content and technique,
right. So I'll give you a funny Gakia story. So it's that same camp we're at, and we get there Friday afternoon early. So there's only a handful of people there on Friday afternoon, right? And he's teaching me Saruchan. Now he's teaching me Saruchan with a real Saruchan. So it's got rocks
hmm
on either end.
yeah,
So
not
like
fun, not fun.
it's as dangerous to you as it is to the enemy, right?
Hmm.
So I got a 12-year-old kid there with me from my dojo, and Gaki is showing me stuff, and then the kid's standing there just watching, and Gakia hands it to the kid,
Hmm.
and he tells the kid, "Try it." The kid looks at me like, I says, "Yeah, go ahead. He's the master. If he says try it, go ahead."
Try it.
And the kid starts, swinging it a little bit, and it gets a little hairy, right? And I move in, and I grab it, and Gakia says, "Oh, maybe football helmet." Maybe have him wear a football helmet. And we all
Well,
had a good laugh. But I remember saying to myself, you know, people want to act like the Saruchan secret, or it's you don't learn that near to the end, or this one you don't learn. And
yeah,
here's Gakia handing it to a 12-year-old, saying, Here, go ahead, try it, right?
yeah,
And it makes you realize that the ones that, in my opinion, are looking to do the right thing the most don't put those restrictions on learning.
no, they shouldn't. You know, a lot of the if we, well, the curriculum, the pedagogy, sorry, for Sakubudo schools is just on its head. So like you've got all these complicated, difficult kata, and it'll say, oh, you have to be seventh dan or sixth dan or whatever. And
Right.
if you calculate like the time that you need to get those ranks, you're elderly by the
Right.
time you get to them, and then you might not even be able to physically do them anymore.
Yeah, like that's it's amazingly true, right? Because again, you look at a form like Shishinokun, well, you say Suishinokun, right? I mean,
Mhm.
some of the movements in there, like the jump and everything, the jump, spin, and land that we do in Ishinru, these are not easy moves, And now that I'm 61, right, I appreciate them even more, right? But I was lucky. I learned that kata when I was in my 20s.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I kind of have, I have a buildup of muscle memory with it now, right? Which helps. But I
Mhm.
say to myself, if I was learning that kata now,
Oh, yeah,
it'd be far
it'd
more
be a
difficult.
challenge.
It'd be far more
Yeah.
difficult, you know. Like I learned Rakan Ken from McCarthy Sensei.
Okay.
And when I learned it, it's probably 25, 30 years ago. So I'm in my mid 20s, maybe 30. And
Mhm.
I couldn't do the flying Arabian. I could only do a
Yeah.
one hand handstand. At the time, I could do the kip up, but when I was just with him in Okinawa, I was sitting next to him and I said, "Yeah, I still practice Nepai and Hopperan that you showed me, and I really like those forms." I said, "But I stopped practicing Rakan Ken. I can't do it. I cannot
Mhm.
do the form." He
Yeah.
goes, "Yeah, you have to make major adjustments." I said, "I'm hoping one of my younger students sticks around, and when they get to a certain point, I'll say to them, 'Hey, would you like to learn this form?' But it's
Mhm.
very dynamic, acrobatic, And maybe a young guy says, 'Yeah, I really like to learn that,'
Yeah.
and I'll
Yeah.
show him the moves and explain to him how to do it, and then he can run with it as long as he wants to, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, I just can't physically do that kind of stuff anymore.
No, I 100%
Yeah,
agree.
those
Yeah.
are over. So let's talk about this.
Oh, the
So
karate studies.
Okay,
Okay,
so
sure.
so my wife walks in I don't know, 8 or 9 days ago, and she's got a package and she says this is in the mailbox. And I
Mhm.
open it up and I'm like, "What's this?" And then I see it's you. I see it's McKenna and I'm like, "Oh, Mario must have sent me a book to review." Oh,
Mhm.
great. I'm getting free books, right? And it's a book that
Mhm.
I actually want to read. So this is even better, right? And so I was like, okay. And then I said, all right, I got to get this guy on the podcast. So I started reaching out. I think I reached out to Andreas. Andreas sent me an email that was an old email. And then I found someone else got me a new email. And that's
Okay.
finally when I reached out for you. And I was so happy you responded and said you'd come on the podcast because I've been a fan of what you do for a long time. And, I feel the same way with a lot of these guys. Like Pat McCarthy, I know for a long time. He came to
Yeah.
my dojo a couple of times to do seminars on the Bubishi.
Mhm.
Um, Joe Swift, I know for a long time,
Yeah.
met with him in Tokyo. And again, through that Ishinru connection,
Mhm.
Andreas now,
Mhm.
a bunch of the different guys and some of the up and coming guys that are doing some good research, Yannick Schultz and Scott
Yeah.
Mertz. And, I really want to promote all you guys because I want you to continue doing what you're doing. And I realize that there's not really a forum for you guys to promote what you do. And as the
Yeah. That's
podcast
true.
became more popular, I said, well, maybe I can do something with that. And that's why I decided to do these interviews. And I try to have different authors on, like Thomas Feldman and all you
Mhm.
different guys. And, and anytime you do something, I'd love to have you on again to talk about it. So feel free to
Thank you.
keep that in mind. And even if you just decide there's something you want to talk about, feel free to reach out. But karate
Thanks.
studies. So
Okay.
magazine
It
that
was a
came out.
magazine.
Okay, 1934.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Genwa Nakasone.
Was the editor because he ran his publishing company, which all those other books I translated came from.
Also karate man.
Pardon?
Was he a karate man? Did he train?
According to his late wife, no,
Oh, interesting.
but he was very passionate about Okinawan culture and
Okay. Very good.
supporting the karate guys.
Good. I like him more
Yeah.
because again, he doesn't have a dog in the fight, right?
No, he really interesting character, like
Yeah.
really interesting dude.
Yeah.
But yeah, he started the magazine. In the preface, like in the foreword, he says, "Yeah, I hope I'm not sure how we're going to do this. Maybe it'll be quarterly, maybe
Right.
it'll be monthly. I'm
Right.
not sure. We'll see. Let's see how it goes." And it went nowhere, unfortunately.
So I mentioned this to McCarthy. He thought there were three issues.
Uh, Perhaps McCarthy Sensei has greater insight than I do. He probably does, but as far as I know, I've only been able to track down one.
Okay. Because when I spoke to him recently, I told him you were coming on. He says, no, he goes, I think I have two more issues. So
I'd
he
love
may
to see
have
him
them.
if they're,
So
yeah,
I'll reach out to him, mention it to him, see what he says.
yeah. Pat Sensei is a walking encyclopedia of
God.
information. So
Oh my
yeah,
God. I
he's
mean,
probably forgot more than I
my
remember.
my head is still hurting from my trip to Okinawa.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, it's
mean,
kind of like he opens your brain and just sort of starts
oh my
pouring.
God. And he treated me literally like gold. I mean, I never expected it in a million years, and he was just so good to me. And then I got to meet a bunch of guys on Okinawa, which was fantastic that I had never met and I'd heard of. And it's funny, they all were like, we feel like we know you because they
Nice.
watch the
Yeah, yeah,
podcast,
yeah.
and they're all coming on too. I'm going to interview all them.
Great.
But so I got to tell you, I read this book, and there were a couple of things in it that were, for me, were quite interesting. And I have one page marked that I just wanted to bring out about this book. And again, it's Karate Studies. Highly recommend it. You can get it Lulu, right?
Yeah.
Mc- Uh,
I haven't released it yet officially. It'll probably come out this week. So
okay,
this is,
okay. So it's not
yeah.
out yet, but guys, I'm telling you, lot of very, very good stuff and interesting stuff. If you want to see where karate was at in the early 30s, and also some things mentioned here that I think we've kind of got away from in karate. So this
Hmm.
page here, when I saw this page,
Oh, for the stances. Yeah.
yeah, I was like, oh, okay. So one of the things we talk about in Tai Chi is this idea of not tossing, where you have to move in balance at all times.
Oh, okay.
So you can't now combat's different. We're talking training.
So
Combat,
like not being double weighted.
right. And when I see this where the foot is going out, like to create the shift, right?
Yeah.
And then also like the way, this is incorrect, this is correct, and the head has to stay level as you move from stance to stance.
Yeah.
This way, I mean, I just said to myself, I says, oh, so back in 34, these things were still being emphasized in certain schools, right?
Yeah.
And now with the advent of sport, I think a lot of this stuff is kind of
Gone out the window.
gone out the window. And I
Yeah.
know my Ishinru is not like that. And I was asked more than one occasion in Okinawa by guys that don't do Ishinru, like
Hmm.
Sensei, you move very different from all the other Ishinru guys. So why is that? And I said, well, I move on a principle-based system. I'm not
Hmm.
moving like, oh, my teacher told me to do this. It's totally about principles with me. And
Hmm.
Master Shimabuku has no problems with the way I do Ishinru. He actually likes it. So obviously,
Nice.
then it's less of a problem,
Yeah.
right?
If the
So
boss agrees, you're good.
right, but some of the stuff that's in here, some of the articles and stuff are really good. I mean, some of the photos are good also. There's not a lot of photos, but it doesn't matter. The ones that are in here are good, and you know, I'm trying to get to the so some of the stuff that's in here, it's such a wide range of topics.
It's a real grab bag of topics. And the thing is, sorry, if you don't mind me saying, it's like there in when I first read that magazine, I had to go through it a couple of times and I was like, oh, and it kind of dawned on me one day. You guys are actually inventing karate right now in this magazine, right? You're kind of establishing its history, its technical base, its philosophy. You're grafting it onto the mainland Japanese notions of Budo, and you're all doing it in this one magazine. I was like, okay, that's kind of cool.
Like here's one: effects of karate jitsu on blood pressure and urine. So this is 1934, and they were already
Yeah,
talking about this, right?
yeah,
I mean, you've got tales in here, you've got stuff in here, articles by Funakoshi, Mabuni, Motobu, right?
yeah.
I
Oh
mean,
yeah, and Toyama, Oyadamari Kanken,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Before he changed his name.
yeah. I mean, it's just, and the stuff, it's just amazing the variety of articles in this one magazine. It's just
Yeah,
like, wow, you know?
yeah, and there's even like a little interview with Weiichi Kambun, right? The
Yeah,
founder of Weiichi. Like,
yeah.
it's like, where'd this come from?
Well, and he's talking about that his style is Pangai Nunru, but we think
Yeah,
we're going to change it.
yeah. He's actually talking back
Uichiru.
then, like, I'm gonna change it to Weiichi. Like, huh?
Right, right. So again, I look at these types of things. This again, I just want to show this so people hopefully will buy it. To me, they're almost like little gems. You know,
Yeah, like they're just like I don't know. They're just like little pieces of the mosaic. Like the piece itself, it's just maybe just a splotch of color, but then when you put them together, you step back and then you kind of get a little bit more of an overview and a picture of what's going on.
right, right. And yeah, so I think it's a great book to add to the collection. And like I said, I highly recommend it, right? I went through it pretty quickly. I mean, there's even an article on how to make a makiwara. I mean,
Yeah, the
it's
one
just
thing that struck me that I liked was the reports on the experimentation for like fighting and then how to do like in Motobu's article, he complains that you can't really have a match with karate, right, based on someone else's rule set because it doesn't work,
right,
right?
right,
But you still need free practice. And then
right,
through the rest of the article, you see all these different reports about how they're experimenting with bogu to do armored kumite, and they hadn't quite worked it out yet.
right.
And then I think like if they had to work that out, karate would have taken a very different path. Good or bad, I don't know. But then unfortunately, the war hit and a lot of university students were, drafted, et cetera, et cetera. So that whole effort just sort of collapsed until it kind of got revised in the late 50s, early 60s.
Yeah, Tatsuo was experimenting with it in Ishinru.
Yeah.
I know I've spoken
Yeah.
with some of the Marines that were doing it, and they said it was not enjoyable to punch the men.
Oh, the kendo mask.
Yeah, and I did kendo for a while, and that thing is no joke. I mean, it's solid
Mm-hmm.
steel, that mask. I mean, it's. So they said we're wearing pads on our hands, and they go, it didn't help that much. It hurt when you hit a guy. I even question sometimes that with because we don't do that in Ishinru anymore. I even question is my thought process was Tatsuo experimenting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So was he
Yeah.
was he observing and watching and seeing certain things and seeing I don't know. Again, I can't ask him. So, and maybe it's a question to ask his son down the road. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So you saw that in Ishinru. You saw that in Okinawa Kempo. They were
Yeah.
doing it.
Yeah.
They were doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Nakamura was doing it. So it did make a bit of a comeback. All right. But yeah, I think I think now in Okinawa you have the opposite. I think they are a little bit leery of even doing freestyle sparring. I think you're seeing like in tournaments and stuff, they're not really doing a lot of the freestyle sparring anymore.
Or you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if they are, they're doing more kind of like the world WKF style or point fighting kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and now they're starting to do Kobudo competition where they fight with the weapons.
Mm, okay.
They wear the armor and fight with the weapons. I mean, me personally, it's not realistic. That's not how combat would happen. So, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, but again, if people enjoy it and it's fun for them and it makes them happy, God bless you.
Go for
But
it. Yeah.
yeah, that's not what I'm interested in doing, you know. So, so what's in the future? Got anything else planned?
Um, honestly, Mike, not right now. That book took probably close to 4 years on and off
Okay.
to kind of do it.
Okay.
Yeah. But so to kind of get where it was. Um, there's a lot of smaller stuff that I want to do.
Okay.
They're mostly like art, just individual articles that I want to translate.
Okay.
Yeah, but there's no like like a book or anything that I'm
Okay.
kind of eyeing right now. I've talked to Joe Swift a little bit about some stuff we might collaborate on, but
Okay.
we haven't kind of really defined it.
Okay.
Nothing definite yet.
Good. Well, it's funny when I interviewed Thomas Feldman, he had just finished the Yabukensu book, and I
Yeah,
said,
that's excellent.
"Yeah, excellent." I said to him, "I said, so what's next?" And he rolled his eyes and said nothing.
It's just I need a break.
He goes, I need a break. I said, all right. I said, yeah, I get it. I said, it's a lot of work. And I said, look, for a guy like me, I'm greedy, right? You guys are doing all the work. I get to sit back and benefit from it, right? So,
Mm.
I'm always looking for more stuff to read and stuff. Like McCarthy just sent me a copy of his revised edition of the Motobu book,
Oh yeah,
and
nice.
it's got 100 extra pages in it.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, and he had showed me the stuff when I was there. So I'm glad that's out. And now he's redoing the Taira book.
Oh, okay, nice.
But what
Yeah,
he's
that's very
doing
nice.
is he's doing it with all the original Taira photographs,
Uh, I
which
wonder if Pat Sensei has the other two volumes which were never published.
I don't know. I mean, he's got a lot of stuff, man. So I don't know. But he told me um, he never wanted to pose for those photos. His intention the whole time was that he wanted to do it, and the publisher wouldn't let him use the tire. Said, "Oh, you can't use those photos. You can't use those photos." And now he's regained control of that book, and he's doing it.
Okay,
So he's also
nice.
he's colorizing and enhancing the photos,
Oh, that's
which
nice.
which is what he did with the Motobu book too, and it looks really good. It looks really good.
Excellent.
So yeah,
Excellent.
and
It's another one to add to the list.
yeah, man, I've been inundated. I've been getting so many books. I mean, I just finished Scott Mertz's new book, which the first 60 pages are on Okinawan history. Fantastic. And then I reached out to Sensei Bill Hayes and asked him to come on the podcast. He studied with Eizo Shimabuku. I'd love to hear
Oh,
him
nice.
talk about that, right? And he
Hmm.
wrote me back such a great email. And I mean, oh, hold on. Hold on a second. Hold on. I lost you for a second.
Oh, I'm still here.
Okay. Yeah. So, um, he wrote me back such a nice email and he asked me, he says, "Hey, can I send you a copy of my book?" And I said, sure. And he sent me his book that he wrote about what it was like training with Eizo Shimabukudo. So, so I'm reading through that, and he's going to come on probably in a few weeks. Um,
Nice.
so yeah, so I'm getting all this stuff. So while you're here,
Sure.
let's talk about this book also, and
Oh, the Ittoman book, Ittoman Mori.
which is also this book.
No, that one, part two.
Yeah. Um.
Yeah, Ittoman Morinobu. Interesting guy. Very little I could track down about him. Was in the Japanese military, is stationed in China.
Okay.
Uh, Probably studied karate when he was in his younger age, but mostly focused on Chinese martial arts when he was in doing his service in China, and then was captured as a POW for a couple of years, and then eventually went back to Okinawa. But oddly enough, as far as I know, never taught anybody. But his book was amazing in terms of like the details, in terms of like training, weaponry, history, forms, extant forms, a series of like the evolution of martial arts. Was just for its time was like sorry ahead of its time. So
Well,
that's one of the reasons why I wanted to like translate it.
I listen. I appreciate it because when I got this one first. And
Mhm.
then when I saw you came out with the revised edition, which has because he wrote two books, right?
Yeah, the second one was just a lot smaller, but I had not translated it, and
Yeah,
I just combined them.
yeah. So, I mean, for me, as I'm reading it, I'm literally having aha moments, right? Because I was he a police officer too?
Yes, he was
Yeah.
a military policeman.
So, he certain things he says in there similar to what Motobu was saying. Like at one point he says, it's really not possible to have a match in karate unless you both agree that, it's okay if one of us gets hurt.
Yeah.
or something to that effect. And when I
Okay.
read that,
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, so this guy is training and his karate is coming from a different perspective, which there's
Yeah.
no sport in this guy's karate.
No.
And you look at even the photos of some of the techniques and you look at them and you're like, oh, okay, right. And some of the techniques require some pretty good athleticism,
Hmm.
right? Um, and it's just interesting where he's coming from. And then the other thing that struck me as so interesting was there are not going to be any kata in this book.
Yeah. He says you can just get those yourself.
And one of the things that I keep harping on is, we've become almost kata crazy.
Oh, katas have become like the currency of Okinawan
Oh
karate.
yeah. And you're talking to a guy that does a lot of kata because I do a lot of different martial arts, right?
Hmm.
And that's one of my jokingly say it's one of my superpowers. I have a memory that I can remember these kinds of things, right? But I can't remember what my wife wanted me to do today, but I can remember some obscure kata from 400 years ago, right?
Yeah.
But in seeing this and realizing, right, like looking at it, it totally makes you realize that with this guy and probably with a lot of the people that have been training for a while at this point, right, in
Hmm.
the evolution of Okinawan karate, is yeah, of course they're teaching you a kata, but more importantly, they're having you work with a partner on fighting
Yeah.
techniques.
Yeah.
And this is one of the discussion I had on Okinawa while I was there, where one of my concerns is that karate in Okinawa, it's losing its original intent, which was as a method of self-defense.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
becoming too much about sport. And again, I'm not against the sport aspect. If it makes you happy, great. I'm all for it. But I think we also need to keep it real to what its original intent was, or else if we lose that completely, well, then are we really doing karate? Like that's my question.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a double-edged sword.
Right,
You have to have both elements.
right. So that's why like James Pankowitz and Dan Antonson, a couple of the guys said to me, well, you need to realize Okinawa is incredibly safe. So there's like
Hmm.
no crime here. And I go, I totally understand that, but let me ask you a question. Do Okinawans ever travel? And they go, well, yeah. I go, well, look, not every place in the world is
There
safe.
you go.
And I
Yeah.
said, so to say that we don't need it here, I think is a misnomer. I just don't think it's correct. And, look, for me, I had a lot of people in my New York dojo. Out here in Arizona is a little different, right? Smaller group, right?
Hmm.
But in the New York school, I had a lot of law enforcement people training. And obviously, for those people, it's different. They could go out that night and
Hmm.
face a life and death situation, and many of them did, right?
Hmm.
But for the civilians I trained, I would always tell them, look, you do karate because you like it. That's first and foremost. Physical, it
Hmm.
keeps you in shape. You enjoy the camaraderie. I said, but you also do it for that one time in your life. And hopefully it never happens, but that one time when you need it. And
Yeah.
when you need it, you want it to be there for you. You don't want it to not be there because that's going to be bad and it's not going to be
Yeah.
good, you know?
Yeah.
And that's the approach I take. So,
Hmm.
but, I mean, like with this book, I mean, a lot of photos of him demonstrating techniques. Um, and I mean, it's just so good.
Yeah.
And his
If
explanation of stuff, I mean, it's almost like he's coming at it from a different perspective.
I think you're right in coming out from like a practical perspective because he was a military cop.
Yeah, and he was a prisoner of war, and I mean, look,
Yeah.
I mean, he's probably again kind of like Yabu Kensu, where the
Hmm.
first military um, experience Kensu had, the first war experience, you're still fighting with swords on occasion,
Hmm.
and then the second war experience, okay, things have changed,
Yeah.
and it was more guns, and
Hmm.
now it's becoming less personal, more
Hmm.
impersonal.
Yeah.
And I think he's probably like a guy like Yabu Kensu who experienced that personal. And and as someone who's experienced that a lot as a police officer, yeah, it's not nice.
Hmm.
Like it's not,
Yeah.
it doesn't look anything like a karate sparring match.
Would imagine. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I really could appreciate that book, and yeah, it's to this day, it's one of my favorite books.
Yeah. With that book, the only regret I have is he wrote. a series of articles in the Okinawa Times and the Ryukyu Shimpo,
Okay.
right? And they were like, I think it was a total of 6 articles he wrote, and I have them all
Okay.
because they were saved on microfiche. The
Okay.
trouble is, they're only about 60% legible.
Oh,
And so, what I'm hoping is the AI will get good enough to
okay.
extrapolate the characters in a
Okay.
couple of years.
Right.
That's really one because I would love to add those articles
Right.
because I
Well, I'd
can
love.
read the part that's legible, but then
Right.
it's kind of just cuts off mid sentence and then it
Right.
continues on the next paragraph, and you're like,
Right.
well, maybe he meant this, but I don't want to. I can't interpolate this.
So I've been saying for the last couple of months when I've been talking to all you different guys, and I was saying it in Okinawa too, that I almost feel like right now, and again, this is my opinion, so what does it mean, right? But
Mm,
I feel like I'm almost living in a golden age of karate research.
yeah,
Like when
yeah.
I put all you guys together and I look at everything in the books and the articles and and even something small, like it doesn't have to be something major, but even a small article gets translated and there's one thing in it that I'm like, huh, I didn't know
This is
that.
gold. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I say that all the time, right? And again, and look, I just did a podcast on envy and resentment, and that's one of the things I don't want to do. Like I'm sure some people will watch this one and like, yeah, I don't like what that guy McKenna does, or I don't like what that guy Mertz does. I don't like the McCarthy. And my thing is I'm not taking that approach. Like I'm taking the approach of that I want to give everybody a forum that's doing real work.
Mm.
If you're telling me you found some ancient scroll written by so and so, and okay, there's well, let me see it, and it's totally made up. Yeah, you're not coming on the podcast. But the guys that are doing the translations, the guys that are doing the research, I mean,
Mhm.
I just am thrilled by it. I mean,
Yeah,
it's just great the stuff that's coming out.
I yeah, me too. Like I do this stuff, but I'm still in awe of like other people. Like that comes out and like, hey, shit, I didn't know this. Sorry,
Yeah,
didn't
no,
mean
it's all right.
sorry.
No,
I
you
didn't.
can curse. This is an adult podcast. You're allowed to curse, so don't worry about
Okay,
it. I curse
okay,
all the time. Yeah. Well, like
all right.
Feldman. Feldman's a prime example.
Mhm.
So the guy comes out with the Itosu book, and I'd seen it, but I hadn't gotten it. And then McCarthy told me. He says, "Oh," I said to McCarthy when he came out with the Keon book, I said, I said, you got to do a book on Yabu Kensu. He says, "Oh no, Thomas Feldman's doing that." I said, "Who's that?" And he goes, "Oh, you didn't read the Anko Itosu?" I said, "No." He goes, "Oh, you got to get that." So as soon as I got off the podcast, I ordered it and I read the Itosu book, and I
Yeah,
was like, "Oh my God, this book is unbelievable." And then I'm more excited because he's coming out with one on Yabu Kensu, right? And I want to
yeah,
read
yeah,
about that one. And then he comes out with that one. And what I appreciate with him um, is the fact that if he can't confirm something, he says
yeah, yeah,
this is an oral tradition. I can't confirm it. That to me is I really appreciate that. I don't
yeah.
want the guy, giving me the
To
BS.
make stuff up.
Yeah, because it's like so so I'll use Ishinru as an example. So I'm 15 years old and I'm reading the Steve Armstrong book on the history of Ishino. And it literally reads like an adventure novel. And
Oh, wow.
as a 15-year-old, I'm like, "Oh my God, this guy Tatsuo Shimabuku is like this is like a movie. I'm reading this book and it's all horseshit, right? So none of it's real, right? And one of the things I'm told is, well, the Japanese military found out that Tatsuo Shimabuku was the top karate man in Okinawa, and they came to him and said, if you teach us karate, you won't have to go in the Japanese army. Okay.
Okay.
In 2019, I'm sitting across from his son at dinner in London. Hey, Sensei, I never asked you, where were you guys during the war? And he looks at me and goes, "Oh, my father put us on a boat. We were in Kyushu." I said, "Kyushu?" He goes, "Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of Okinawans fled to Kyushu."
Went to Kyushu.
He
Yeah.
goes, "My father
Yeah.
felt that it was the safest, probably of the islands where there's the
Hmm.
least chance of fighting. And he brought us there. And he said, we're lucky our boat didn't get sunk. A lot of boats got sunk and many Okinawans
Hmm.
died." I said, "Well,
Yeah.
how long were you there?" He goes, "We came back when the war was over." So I'm like, okay, so I guess the whole story about the Japanese army obviously is,
A
right?
little bit fictional.
Just a little, right? But the funny thing is no matter, like, I'll tell somebody that and they'll say to me, "Oh, no, no, no. Like, no.
Oh no.
So
Oh
I look at
dear.
them and I go, so what you're telling me is the son of the founder, he's making
Didn't know
this
where
up?
he was. Didn't
Like,
know where he was when he was a kid.
come on. What are we talking about here? Right? Like, you
Yeah.
know, and I just find this stuff fascinating. And the just the nonsense that comes out and the stuff that they say. And, like again, like in Ishinru, in the 66 films that Tatsuo filmed, Twifa, it says Chifa, Chiefa.
Okay.
Okay. A Japanese did the translation. Tatsuo
Mhm.
saying Twifa. It was Minoru Miki, still alive,
Yeah.
good guy. I know
Yeah.
people that know him. Twifa is an Okinawan word.
Yeah.
He thinks he's saying Chifa. So he
Oh
writes
dear.
down he writes down Chifa. So now people call Hamahiga no Twifa in Ishinru. They call it Chifa. So I've explained to I don't know how many people that it's just a
It's a
translation
typo.
mistake. It's a typo. And they people get angry with me. Well, so and so told me it was called Chifa. I'm like, listen, everybody thought the world was flat, and there's still some people that do, but it's Hamahiga no
We got
Twifa.
no
It's the
tool.
same kata. And when I asked Kichiro Shimabuku this, I said, Sensei, what's the name of the Twifa kata? He goes, Hamahiga no Twifa. I go, what about Chifa? He
You're
goes,
like,
he goes,
what?
what are you talking about? Like, and I said, okay, forget about it, right? But
Yeah.
but again, it's just funny in martial arts that we are confronted with proof
Yeah. And then, yeah.
and we'll still go with the legend. We'll still go
Yeah.
with the other thing, right? And I'm all for the legend too. I think the legends are fun.
Yeah. But you want to have a balance. You want to have a balanced look, right?
100%. Because I think the truth is more fascinating.
Oh yeah, like that's why one of my favorite books is by Robert W. Smith's Chinese Boxing Masters, right? That little red book, but he gives you biographies and his experience with all those teachers, what warts and all.
I'm interviewing one of his students coming up.
Oh, very nice,
Yeah.
very very
Yeah.
nice.
And he reached out for me. So what's starting to happen is some people are starting to reach out to me to ask me if they can come on the podcast.
Yeah,
And, some people no, right? But other people, yes. And when he told me what he'd like to discuss and the fact that he was a student of Robert W. Smith, I said, oh, I'd love to have you on. So he'll be hopefully on
yeah,
in the next few weeks. So,
yeah. One book I'm really looking forward to is one by James Hatch about Chitoryu, the Chitoryu founder, Chitose Ryoshi.
oh, right. I heard that's coming out.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and James is a trained PhD historian. So
Okay.
he's been researching this book for years. So
Okay.
I know it's on the cusp. I think it's coming out soon and it's one I'm looking forward to
You
because
friends
I
with him?
know he's done a fantastic
I
job.
don't I don't know him. So if you want to reach out for him, I'd love to have him on and talk about the book.
Sure, sure. We'll just make fun of his sick Irish accent. So
That's okay. But again, I want to promote these people. I want them to I want you guys to have more success because the more success you do more things. And
yeah,
then I
but
and then
the
I get
nice
to
thing,
then I get to read them. So
yeah, but the nice thing about from what I've talked to him about it, like he's presenting like I'm not glossing anything over. Here it
see,
is.
that's what right.
And the reader can make their own decision.
Right.
We're all adults in the room.
Right.
You don't need to soften it up.
Well, listen, none of us are perfect last time I checked, right?
Mhm.
We've all made mistakes, right? None of the early practitioners, they're all humans, right? Um,
Mhm.
so again, I want warts and all. I think it makes them more interesting.
Yeah. So it's hard in a Japanese context because there's just the cultural barriers of like,
Right.
not questioning, accepting what you're
Right.
told,
Right.
presenting people in the best light, not
Right.
talking
Right.
disparagingly, which is highly correlated negatively with the amount of alcohol consumed. But hey,
Right. Right. Yeah,
but
no, it's true.
it's very hard to get through those barriers. And
Right.
then so if you're, it's nice to hear that your teacher's just like very direct, like, no, you know, that's not what happened, right? And we
Right.
need more of that.
Right.
Um, Instead of someone fabricating something whole cloth just because they don't want to make me feel bad. You know what? Let me feel bad. I don't care. I need to know this.
So I'll give you a couple other things. So McCarthy Sensei had never met Kichiro Shimabuku. And as soon as we left his house the first night, McCarthy turned to me in the van and said, because I cannot thank you enough for introducing me to this guy. He goes, I've heard some things about him, and it turns out it's all nonsense. I said, yeah, well, I've known that for years, right? Again,
Hmm.
people have agendas, right? And he
Hmm.
said, he says, my God, he says, he knows a lot. And McCarthy gave him a copy of his Keon book.
Oh, nice.
And he said, there's pictures of your father in here. I wanted you to have this, right? And 2 nights later, we went back there to pick him up to all go out to dinner. And as soon as he opens the door, he says to McCarthy, I read the book.
Oh,
And
wow.
McCarthy looks at him and goes, really?
Oh,
He goes, yeah. He goes, it's good. A couple of things. He goes like this,
yeah, a
right?
little off.
And he turns around and walks away. And McCarthy turns around and looks at me like he read the book already, right? So I asked him a few questions, and McCarthy was asking him questions too. And I said, so Sensei, is it Shimabuku or is it Shimabukuro? And he said it's Shimabuku. He says Shimabukuro is the Japanese way of pronouncing it. He says it's Shimabuku. I said, well, at the Kaikon, they've got your father listed as Shimabukuro. He said the Kaikon's wrong. He said they should fix it, right? I
Yeah.
said, okay. And, then I asked him while I was there, because again, there's, different things. There's different versions. So there's one Okinawan book that's not available in English, but Andreas was nice enough to translate the section for me that says Tatsuo started karate with Miyagi sensei.
Oh, interesting.
And that Miyagi introduced Tatsuo to Kion sensei. I raised
Okay.
that specter with Kichiro Shimabuku. He goes, I don't think so.
Oh,
He
interesting.
goes,
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's the opposite way around. He goes, I can't be 100%, but he says, I'm pretty sure Keon was first, right?
Yeah.
And then when I was talking, so one of the other things that Andreas mentioned is that our version of Seiyuchin could possibly be an early version that Tatsuo had learned from Miyagi,
Okay.
and that the version later on is the one that Miyagi finally settled on.
Hmm.
Okay, that's as good a thing as I've heard,
Explanation
right?
as any. Yeah.
But then I interview Scott Mertz, and Scott Mertz says to me that Motoburu does Seiyuchin. Now, I didn't know that.
Hmm. Okay. I wasn't aware of that.
He says there's a book that has photos of all the kata.
Okay.
I've never seen it, but he's going to scan the book of the Seiyuchin kata and send it to me. So he
Okay.
says he says a lot of it looks the same as the way you guys do Seiyuchin. Now
Okay.
again, and I'm the first one to say we're never going to know.
Yeah.
Okay, we're
But it's
never going
fun
to know.
looking.
So like me, if I write a book and I write a brief history of Ishinru, and believe me, it'll be a brief history because again, what's real, what's not real. You put stuff down and you tell people, look, this is what I can glean, but don't pay too much attention to this. It's nice to know, but concentrate on being good at the actual physical stuff. That's always what I say, right?
Yeah.
Um, but but it'd be fascinating if I see those photos and it turns out that it does look similar, and it's a question, oh, okay, right? So maybe there is something to this. Who knows? But again, we're not going to know. I could ask Kichiro Shimabuku, but I'm sure he would probably say to me, Mike, I don't know, right?
Yeah.
Again, because we just don't know, it's like originally when I started doing Ishinru, I get Shorinru guys that would give me a hard time and say, why do you guys go to the left in your Nahanshi? You're the only guys that go to the left. And meanwhile, that's not true. Motobu goes to
No.
the left,
Motobu goes to the left. Most Tamari
and
goes to the
Tamari,
left.
right? The Tamari goes
Yeah.
to the left, right? But again, the problem is once it becomes Coke and Pepsi,
Oh,
you've got
yeah.
to say, well, see, those guys are doing it wrong. We all go to the right. They're going to the left, right? Because again, we've got to point out what we think are
Differences.
faults
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
make ourselves seem like what we're doing is the real stuff, right? And
Yeah. It's a human nature to kind of have like the in group and the out group, just like, and that's kind of like more so emphasized in Japanese culture. But yeah, I kind of like the old essay that Toyama Kanken wrote, Oyanamari, right? He wrote in one of his books. He wrote basically the whole notion of styles was just nonsense.
yeah,
He wrote like a short 1 page essay saying this is just stupid.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
and
I had
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I was actually training people that did Chitoru, but I was training
Hmm.
them in Mariyoshi Kobudo. And I was at their dojo, and the woman was testing for Godan and Chitoru.
Hmm.
And her and her husband said to me, Sensei, we're wondering if you could help us. Um, my wife has to demonstrate fighting applications for all the moves in this one particular kata. And there's a couple
Hmm.
of moves that we just have no idea, right?
Yeah.
I said, all right, let me see the move. So I had him do it a few times. I kept watching, watching. I said, all right. And I showed him a fighting application.
Mhm.
And they looked at me and they were like, do you know this kata? I said, no, I've never seen this
No.
kata. I said, I've never seen this kata. And they were like, well, how do you, I said, well, first off, sadly, I've been in a lot of fights. So,
Mhm.
I see a movement. I say, okay, well, how would I use that movement in a situation? And I say, okay, well, maybe like this. And maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. So maybe I got to play with it until I figure it out how it works.
Mhm.
So I showed them a few different things and they were like, oh my God, thank you so much, And, so that's one of the things that, that I've come to believe too, is that all this stuff comes out of the practice of two-man, two-man fighting applications.
Yeah.
The kata are a modern recent invention. And even if that modern recent invention is 200 or 300, 400 years old, that's still modern in the scheme of warfare.
Yeah.
You know, uh,
The kata to me are a necessary component to training, but in and of themselves, they're not sufficient. They're just not going to really trend. They're great for a lot of things, but
well, it's like my Tai
uh,
Chi master says. He says, what they're great for, it's the one practice you do where you don't have to hold back.
mhm.
He said, Mike, if me and you are working together and we're practicing, we have to be careful because we don't want to hurt each other. So there's naturally going to be a little bit of holding back. But when you're doing kata, you can let that punch fly. You can let that kick fly with full power, with no fear of injuring anybody because there's no one in front of you. So in terms of that, kata is good. Balance, speed,
Mhm.
posture, all that stuff is great. But if you're not practicing those techniques, figuring out how to use them with a partner,
Yeah, you're just
you're a dancer.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's what you are, you know?
And it all goes back to the Okinawan, karate being introduced into the school system to an extent. I don't think that was the major issue myself. I think the biggest issue was when it was introduced to the teaching college,
Okay.
personally.
Okay,
And the
so the
reason
teaching the teaching college was where?
in Okinawa, so the
Okay.
Okinawa Prefectural Teachers College, the
Okay.
normal school. I
Okay.
think that's where the biggest change in Okinawan karate culture came because you taught a generation of instructors that were essentially teaching karate for PE, which then went
Right.
out throughout the island and
Right.
disseminated it. The
Right.
individual students, they're 10, 11, 12, 15 years old. They learn it, they get out of school, they never do it, use it again, right? But the teachers, they're the ones, and some of them became pretty notable instructors on the island themselves,
Right.
like Tokura Ambun, Kyoto Juhatsu, right?
Right. Right.
And people like that.
Well, I've said in other podcasts, I said, when was the last time an Okinawan karate master had an actual fight?
Probably before the war,
So,
possibly.
and again, it's not a knock, but I think, it's called the martial truth, right? That's the podcast.
Hmm.
So I think
Hmm.
you got to speak the truth, right? And so I'm not knocking them again because if the island's safe, God bless them. But it does make you lose when it's a fighting art. It makes you lose a bit of your edge.
Yeah, but when you take a step back and look at the culture at the turn of the century, what was happening on Okinawa, like there was like tsujigiri, right? Or tsujitsuki, they would call it
Right.
in Okinawa, where basically in the red light district, you would get jumped by a
Right.
guy
Right.
who might know karate, might not know karate, and beat the crap out of you,
Right.
basically. Or you'd
Right.
have like one on one, like, hey, mano a mano,
Right.
let's go.
Right.
And the crime rate at the time was was probably the highest in um, Japan at the turn of the century.
Right.
There's actually an old article I tracked down from the Journal of Statistics in like 1914, which goes through all the different assaults and murders that happened throughout Okinawa Prefecture in a 20-year period,
Oh,
and it was the highest in Japan.
you should translate that.
So,
That'd be
so it's
fascinating.
yeah, and then so the conclusion was that, like, and even in that article was like, karate has no place in modern times.
Hmm.
It should be getting rid of. And it's interesting to note the timing because that's when it starts to get introduced into the school system and then into the teachers' college. And then, sorry, I'm just
No, no,
rambling
no,
now,
no.
but
Go ahead. No, no, no. Go ahead. Finish. No, no, finish because your point's important.
so then there's on top of that, there was like a series of travel essays written by a guy called Yokoyama Kendo,
Okay.
right, in 1914 about he wrote a book called Satsuma to Ryukyu, right? So Satsuma and Ryukyu.
Okay.
And then he wrote a series of there's one it's basically one chapter, but then it was presented in the Okinawa Shimbun in a series of like 12 articles. And he
Okay.
talks about his experience in Okinawa and surprise, surprise, his experience with karate.
Okay.
So he met a couple of karate guys, saw some demonstrations at the schools, saw a demonstration at the teachers college, and what he describes is essentially a little bit of kata, sorry, a lot of kata and a little bit of line drills, but nothing much
And this is
else.
this is 1914.
This is 1914, and he's an experienced judoka and kendoka. This guy,
So
so
this plays into one of my theories, which is um, that by around 1900, the karate was beginning to seriously change.
mhm,
And again, when you look at that meeting where they're all there and the minutes from that meeting, and the discussion is how do we make karate popular?
mhm,
How do we standardize the kata?
mhm,
You know, they're looking at judo and they're like, okay, we have to make karate like judo, right?
mhm,
So you begin to see, okay, well, right. So like, you know, I tell people all the time, like I'm looking for the older version of karate. And you know, even in the way we move, right? And the fighting applications. So I'm not interested in you know, where a guy's in a karate stance and coming at me with a punch. And you know,
mhm.
if you look at Motobu's two-man drills, they're nothing like the modern
Yeah,
two-man drills we're seeing on Okinawa.
mhm,
They're
mhm.
literally the opposite of those drills.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, he's doing some he's teaching some things in those drills that are obviously from fighting experience. There's no other
mhm,
way. They're not from anything else, right?
mhm,
So like, you know, that's one of the things I brought up when I was in Okinawa. Well, why aren't the people training now creating drills like that? Why are they doing these? You step forward once, you block, you step back, you block, you step forward, you block. There's no like it's just it's like a prearranged nonsense thing that's really not teaching you anything about real fighting, you know?
mhm,
And you look at the Motobu drills and you're like, okay, these are very different. Like
mhm,
I don't see anybody doing drills like that on Okinawa, you know?
mhm.
So, I mean, so there were glimpses of the old ways still being done at that time. And I just think as it's gone forward, I think we see a change. Like I talked to James Pankowitz and I said to him, when's the last time you saw an Okinawan karate master do knife defense? And it was James and Dan Antonsen, and they both said to me, never.
Mhm,
I said, okay, well, Tatsuo Shimabuku had knife defense. Like he
mhm,
would teach knife defense. And James said, could you show me a couple of them? So I showed him a couple of ones that Tatsuo did. And they're very simple. I
mhm.
said, and it doesn't matter what you think of them. The fact is, he was
He had
teaching it.
them.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I said to him, Tatsuo Shimabuku taught ground fighting. And they look at me. I said, when's the last time you saw an Okinawan karate master work on ground fighting? And they both looked at each
Mm.
other and they're trying to think and they can't. And
Yeah.
I said, okay, so now we're talking the late 50s, 60s, Tatsuo's still teaching this. Now it's kind of all fallen by the wayside, right?
Mhm.
And so you're telling me other Okinawan sensei weren't teaching that at that time? I would have to think there were probably some other ones that were teaching it still too, right?
Yeah.
And you know, so again, I just think it's something that we're missing. And I'd love to see
Yeah.
a little bit more realism brought back into it. Like do the sport by all means, but I think the realism I think helps, you know.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be like dangerous or whatnot, because I
No.
think like the classical Japanese Koryu are a good model to look at, where they've taken the techniques, they've codified them, they've kept most of the martial aspect and provided a safe platform for you to train the technique, one aspect or two aspects of it. And that I think, that's like kudos to McCarthy Sensei first for him, like kind of paving the way for like bringing that model in.
So do you do any koru?
I did Chikubushima Bojutsu.
Okay. So I've trained in Sosui Shitsuru Jiu-Jitsu, Yagyu Shinkagiru, Shindo
Mhm,
Musuru Jodo,
mhm.
and Katori Shinto-Ru.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's a level of intensity and seriousness which the Okinawan arts just do not
No,
approach.
and I've tried to bring that into my two-man practices in the Kobudo.
Yeah.
So that's why some Kobudo people don't like training with me because it's a little bit more intense. Like you have
Oh,
to,
you and Fred Lowe's, you sound
well, Fred's a friend. We're both the same way.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I'll tell you a funny Fred Lowe story. Fred Lowe calls me. Gaki is coming into New York in 2001. So he was supposed to come in with Yogi Yosei Sensei in September of 2001. 9/11 happens. We have to cancel everything. Most of the senior people in my dojo, we're working hours 12 on, 12 off for a couple of months. New York's a mess. So we cancel it and we push it forward 6 or 8 months. Fred reaches out and says, "Hey, I lived on Okinawa. I studied Matayoshi Kobudo. I was a student at Kimo Wall. I've trained with Gakia Sensei. Can I come to the workshop?" I said, "Yeah, anybody can come. Everybody's welcome to come." So Fred comes the first night and he's paired off with one of my students, and we're doing a partner work technique.
Mhm.
And my student splits Fred's head open.
Oh dear.
And I was like, initially, like I'm annoyed with my student, right? I'm like,
Mhm.
what'd you do? This guy, we don't know this guy. What happened? And he goes, Sensei, I just came in with a strike.
Yeah.
He didn't block. So Fred comes over and says, Mike, listen to me. It's not his fault. It's totally my fault. I made the cardinal mistake. I assumed you guys weren't that good.
Oh, okay.
And he goes, and now I realize, okay, these guys train hard. These guys
Yeah.
are serious, right? And so Fred wasn't upset. It was, I think he got like 1 or 2 stitches, and that was it,
Yeah.
right? But so it's funny, right? We have this idea that maybe, oh, we're the only ones training like this,
Mhm.
right? But there's other people, there's other groups that train hard, right?
I
Um,
would think they're the exception, not the rule.
yeah, I would think so too, a little bit. But I mean, like, I'll give you the example in Sosui Shitsuru. I was invited to go to the Tokyo branch. I was senior to them, and they asked me to teach jujitsu. And I'm really trying to cut their neck with a sword.
Mhm.
Like they have to block it. If you can't block it, well, that's not my problem. You have to work on it. Now, again, I'm
Mhm.
not talking about someone who's just learned the form. I'm
Yeah.
talking about someone that's training for years. But the problem was they were practicing it like it was dance choreography.
Mm.
So there's no martial intent. And that's a big problem right now going on within the Koru in Japan. That a lot of them, there's not enough martial intent that it's too much of a choreography.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
all of them. It's not all of them,
No.
but some of them that is a problem. And that's almost becomes like the death knell for a martial art. Because,
Yeah.
okay, well, so like, I'm just saying it's a modern problem, you know.
Yeah. But doubling back, like kind of going full circle here, but I still think it's a good model
Oh,
that
100%.
should be adopted by the Okinawan arts.
100%.
And there's,
100%.
but instead what you got was like as it got disseminated in the school system and then in the teachers college who are like basically glorified PE instructors passing it on. And then you have all these committees. And then like in 37, they come up with these 12 basic kata, which are like in the overview of karakido, right? Those 12,
Yeah.
like for
Yeah.
like in the dictionary under redundant, it says see these kata. Like
Right.
there's pointless.
Well, that's why
Sorry for like sorry for shooting down my own translation, but you're reading this going, what is going on here?
listen, I totally agree. And one of the things that makes me happy that I lucked out and wound up in a Nishinru dojo is the fact that Tatsuo wanted nothing to do with any of that stuff.
Hmm.
And he's like,
Yeah,
no, we're not doing that stuff. We're not doing Pinan katas. We're not doing Takioka. We're not doing them. We're
yeah.
doing the kata we do, and that's it. And I think to this day, I think there's a bit of resentment still against Ishinru on Okinawa for two reasons. One, for Tatsuo thinking like that, and two, for the fact that he had that contract where he was making so much
Oh, with
money
the
for the
yeah, the
government.
US.
And
Yeah.
I still believe there's,
Still?
oh yeah, 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 I totally believe it.
Jeez. The man died 50 years
And
ago.
it doesn't matter.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
and the other thing is Ishinru is not big on Okinawa. It's very small, but outside of Okinawa, it's huge.
I thought it was kind of being revised more on Okinawa, like
Well,
to an
Kichiro
extent.
Sensei's, the dojo was closed for a year. He had an issue with his leg. He told me before I left he's reopening the dojo very soon. He's got two guys that are going to help him. He's 85. Um, you know, the other person teaching Ishinro in Okinawa, you know, he's making changes. He's adding kata. He's, you know, under one of the umbrella organizations, and he's allowing them to tell him what to do. Um, the headmaster of Ishinru is like, we're Ishinru. Nobody tells us what to do.
Hmm.
We're Ishinru. If they don't like it, that's their problem. It's not our problem. This is what we do. This is how we do it. You know, so I take that approach, and I believe in that approach. And that was one of the things that impressed McCarthy Sensei about Kichiro Shimabuku was the fact that he doesn't care what these other people think of him. He's like, this is what my father taught, you know, and this is what I teach. And if other
Hmm.
people don't like it, that's okay. But we're not going to change what we do because someone else wants us to do it a different way, you know.
Hmm.
Um, so that's an interesting thing. So yeah, Ishin is very small in Okinawa right now.
Oh, okay.
You know, it's just it is what it is. You know, I'm getting, you know, since I got this promotion, right? You know about my promotion.
I heard it. Yes,
Okay, yeah.
congratulations.
Yeah, yeah. You don't have to say that. Congratulations, right? It is what it is. But the point is since I've gotten this promotion, um, I have a lot more friends.
Mhm. Okay.
Right? But two, some of the phone calls and the questions I get asked, I find quite
Hmm.
interesting. You know, like somebody's asking me, well, what are you going to do about the fact that Ishinru is so small in Okinawa?
Not my problem.
What am I supposed to do about that? Oh, wait, I'll leave my wife. I'll move to Okinawa and I'll teach. Sorry,
Yeah.
not happening. You know, I
Hmm.
can only worry about what I have control over. You know, I don't have control over that. You know, it is what it is. I mean, you know, so I just keep doing what I'm doing. You know, uh,
Yeah, the Crusades ended a long time ago. So it's like the
yeah,
only real unit that is kind of the only real, for lack of a better term, unit that a student and teacher needs to focus on is the dojo, your
yeah,
own dojo.
yeah,
That's it.
yeah,
Anything else is just a distraction.
yeah. I tell people this all the time. I say, you know, rank really only matters within your dojo or maybe your organization, maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
But really within dojo, because even within the IWKA, Master Shimbuku's organizations, you know, not all dons are created equal. Let's just put it that
Mm-hmm.
way. And it's not a knock, it is. I don't expect anybody to be to a certain standard that I might have, right? But within my own dojo, the people I train, I
Mm-hmm.
expect them to meet a certain standard.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that's just the way it is, right? So yeah, I think that whole thing is really like you said. It's really if you worry about your dojo and not get caught up in all the nonsense that goes on out there, I think you'll have a successful dojo.
Yes.
But if
Yeah,
you're worried about
100%.
what the guy down the block's doing or what the other guy in Ishinru is doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then I think you get caught up in things that hurt your dojo because you're focusing on things that are kind of just a waste of time,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah. And then you just surround yourself with sort of like energy vampires. They're just kind of just sucking the life out
Yeah.
of you. It's like,
Well,
and
well,
it takes out your enthusiasm and your joy from training.
yeah. One of the things I say all the time is with the dojo, with the guy that took over my school, one of my senior guys took over the school in New York, and I said to him, first off, he said to me a month after I left, he goes, I thought I knew how much work you were putting into this. And he said, boy, was I wrong. And I said, yeah, it's a lot of work, right? And you know, I said to him, you know, don't forget that there's addition by subtraction. Like,
Hmm.
don't worry if a student leaves and you're thinking, oh my God, you know, blah, blah. I go, sometimes, you know, you realize a student leaves and you realize maybe that student wasn't good for the school, and maybe now the school is better for that. And
Hmm.
that's something I've learned throughout a long time of teaching that you know, not everybody's meant to stay with you, right?
No.
And and if they leave, sometimes it's better. The school is actually better. Um, you know,
Yeah, I know. 100% agree. I my goal is like I can teach the student enough that they get a certain level of proficiency, and then the rest they can go away and practice by themselves and like come in like a doctor and come in for a checkup and go, hey, that looks good. That looks good. This one's a little off.
right, right.
Then
Yeah,
they
like
got karate for life.
yeah. I mean, you know, I do a bunch of Zoom classes now with people all over the world, right? And Yeah, I mean, most of those students have also trained with me.
Mm.
So it's not like they've never met me or done anything with me, right? Um, but yeah, for a lot, like my student in New York, he does Zoom classes once a week. And what's it mostly? It's just to make sure he's staying on the path, right? Like he'll say to me, he say, hey, let's go through all the Ishin Rukata. I want to make sure I haven't started doing anything weird. And it's just, again, like that, like you said, a tune up, right?
Yeah.
He's getting that tune up and he just stays on top of his game, right? Um, but yeah, so no, nothing in the immediate
Oh,
future.
just like I said, these small articles here and there, and yeah, nothing big. There's the Miyagi Hisateru book, Memories of a Karate Man, but I need a break. I don't think I have the energy to do it. And like I said, there's Joe's been mentioning some stuff that I might help him out with.
Cool.
So yeah,
Joe's
so that'll be
book on
good.
Itosu is very good too.
Joe's book is anything like when Joe and Pat are in the room, I just listen.
Yeah,
I learn, I
it's
just smile
unbelievable.
and listen and just go, yeah, I don't have anything to add.
Yeah.
You guys are just brainiacs that way. So,
It was interesting sitting and watching McCarthy and Kichiro Shimabuku talk. And McCarthy would talk to him in Japanese, right? But Kichiro speaks
mhm,
very good English, which was, so then they would tell me what they were talking about or whatever. But it's obviously it was easier for both him and Kichiro to communicate that way, right? It's his first language.
mhm,
It just makes everything easier, right?
mhm.
But even some of the things they were talking about, it was just quite interesting, And like you said, I mean, I'm sitting next to McCarthy in his office in Okinawa, and he's showing me some stuff, and I'm just like, it's just like,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I just enjoy like being in that kind of environment. So like if I'm, like I said, a couple of years ago, I was back in Japan and I met up with James and Joe and Quint and all these other like really smart guys.
right,
Just go out, have a beer, and
yeah,
just like they're like, Mario, why is quiet? It's like I'm getting all the secrets. I'm just
yeah,
absorbing
yeah,
everything.
yeah. Well, it's funny when I reached out for Joe and I said, hey, you got to come on the podcast. He's like, he goes, well, what do you want to talk about? You want to talk about something specific? Or we're just going to have a free for all. I said, let's just have a free for all. He's like, all right, that sounds great. And, I had him on him and it was great. And I still told him the same thing, next time you come out with something or if there's something you want to, talk about, come on. So, and like I say all the time, I said, this is great for me because I get to talk to you guys. And I say all the time, I don't care if anybody watches it because
Yeah.
I enjoy it. So it's for me personally, I like it. And like talking to different people, hearing their perspective on things, um,
Mhm.
and then when I get one of you guys on that are, translating these to me very important historical documents, again, within the karate world or
Yeah.
within the martial arts world. We're not talking about the wide world, right?
Yeah.
But within our world that we really enjoy, these are important things, and I think people should support this, and they should, purchase the books.
Mhm.
It helps. Like someone sent me a message yesterday after the Scott Mertz interview came out. Oh, another book I have to add to the list. And I'm sure when this podcast comes out, I'm going to be getting the same messages.
Yeah.
Another one. I've got to add to the list. And yeah, because again, I think all this stuff gives us insight into what these guys were thinking
Yeah.
now almost 100 years ago. I mean,
I think now, like you're right, it's a golden age, and like there's enough distance now to have the perspective to kind of see, oh, like McCarthy Sensei said, like a BFO, a blinding flash of the obvious.
right,
You're like
right,
going, oh, that's what you guys were trying to do. Oh,
right.
okay, you were cobbling together a tradition and then defanging it, and then putting it into the school system, and then trying to hope it pass it off as like a disseminated as a PE course,
Right.
basically.
So I asked Kichiro Shimabuku while I was there. I said, Sensei, did your father ever say anything about Motobu Sensei? And he looked at me.
And
He
he probably
says,
said, yeah,
so he looked at me and said, well, the one thing I vividly remember, he said, was when he would sit and talk, he was constantly hitting the floor with his fist.
mm,
He would just be constantly, like, I guess, conditioning that
yeah,
hand, right? And Kichiro Sensei also said, and if he was against the wall, the back of his elbow, he'd be hitting the wall, like. And then you look at a picture of Motobu's fist.
yeah.
And it makes total sense
Yeah,
because it's this massive thing on
absolutely.
the end of his wrist, right?
Yep.
And and again, it's a little tidbit. It's nothing of major importance, but
No,
it's
but they add up and they're important.
yeah, and it's fascinating stuff. That's why I'll be digging into the Motobu book again, right?
Yeah.
Because he added a whole bunch of new material, and and again, I go back, I reread the books because again, you read them and you realize, oh, you missed that the first time, you missed that the
Hmm.
second time, right? So it's great, and I think everybody's making a contribution. The guys that are doing the serious work, and for guys like me, it's fantastic. And I'm hoping more and more people will take a look at these books and get them and read them because I think it'll open their eyes to that maybe karate is more than what they think it is.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah. You
you
know,
know.
it has a history. It's been around a little bit, not quite as long as we had hoped. Like some people maybe thinking it was some ancient art, but it's not. But it's still, you know, an important and culturally relevant art that like literally millions of people practice, whether it's in sport or recreationally or combatively.
Yeah, and
So,
it's also interesting that in the West, the guys seem to be more interested in the real karate.
mm,
That Westerners seem to be more interested in that. Now, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of them that want to do sport, but there's a
mm,
lot that are interested in the more combative aspect of what karate is all about or was all
yeah,
about, the
yeah,
more original method of doing it.
yeah.
So,
And it's as you said, like, culturally, Japan is a very like societally, Japan is a very safe place. But
yeah.
if we picked you up and we, dropped you in downtown Baltimore, that would be a different question, maybe. No offense to people in Baltimore.
No, or East New York, Brooklyn, where I worked for 17 years. So,
Or I can even say here in Vancouver, if I dropped you down to the downtown east side, it's
okay.
a different
So,
story.
yeah, yeah. All these big cities have dangerous areas, you know.
Exactly.
So, you know, but yeah, so what do you do? What do you do for a living now?
I'm an analyst. I work at one of the municipal hospitals here. I'm
Oh,
a business
okay.
analyst. Yeah.
Okay.
So I've been doing that for the past 15 years or so.
Okay. All right.
So
Very good. And
a
how
lot
old are
of
you?
data current. 56.
Oh, okay. I got you by a few years. So,
Yeah. So I got a couple of more years before I can retire. And then, trying to convince my wife to at least move back to Japan part time. So
okay.
we'll see. I would
I
love that.
so this April I'm retired from the police department 15 years.
Excellent.
And
Congratulations.
thanks. It's been a long time. I can't believe it's been that long already. So, it doesn't seem that long, you know.
No, but I will probably be, like you in some ways, like a retire, and people say, "Oh, you're going to be so bored." Like, are you kidding me? I
Yeah.
have a laundry list of things I
Yeah.
want to do.
I'm busier now than I've probably ever been.
Yeah,
I mean,
and in
because
a good way,
oh, a
doing
good
things that
way.
you
Yeah.
really love.
And then one of the things I'll say is, and I've said this before, but I think it bears repeating, is I move out here and I have this building built
Hmm.
that's on my property. So I walk
Hmm.
out my back porch, I walk 300 feet and I'm in my dojo, right? Um, and so I can come out here every day and train. And when I was in New York, I'm teaching 7 days a week. And I would still train extra, but I couldn't really devote that time to it that I
Mm.
wanted to devote for it. Now out here, I'm only teaching 4 days a week. Um, and I really have been able to focus on me and my skill
Good.
set more.
Yeah.
And I think that's helped a lot. And it's given me insights into things. Like I'm back to rediscovering things about physical movement, about how to do certain things, about how to move. Um,
Hmm.
that's great. So it's almost like reinvigorated me.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. So, but a
Yeah.
couple of more years,
Yeah,
couple of more years.
and then with the channel, creating all the material for the channel, and then the
Hmm.
podcasts. Um, so it's been I'm having a blast. I gotta tell you, I'm having a blast. So
Well, I hope to be in part of that crowd. Maybe in another, let's say, 4 or 5 years.
okay, yeah. Well, you'll
That would
still
be
be
good.
young enough. I mean, that's the key, and the key is to stay healthy.
Yeah.
Knock wood,
Yes.
be
one Hundred
healthy.
percent.
You know,
Yeah.
um, you know. Sadly, a lot of police officers they retire, they don't take care of themselves. They die very young. So
Well,
I'm lucky.
yeah.
I'm gifted with good health, and I take care of myself. So that helps. you know.
Well, I will be in the. I will be buying a membership in your club then.
Good, good. So listen, I appreciate you coming on.
No, thank you for having me.
Anytime you want to come on, so let's show a couple of these books again. This is the one that's coming out very soon, Karate
Yeah.
Studies. Okay,
Hmm.
available through Lulu.
Hmm.
These are the two books on Morinobu Ittoman, right? Okay,
Yeah.
they're both available on Lulu. Highly
Hmm.
recommend. Okay, and let's show this one again. And there's a bunch of other ones
Oh.
that I don't have.
Yeah.
I don't. Some of the other ones I don't have. I think the Mabuni
Well,
ones they're translated.
I shall send you copies of the Mabuni ones.
Okay, appreciate it. So those are also there. You should invest in. Um, and yeah, I really appreciate you coming on, and I hope we'll do this again in the future.
Excellent.
All right, take care.
All right. All the best.
All right, bye. Hope you enjoyed my interview with Mario McKenna. I did. I really enjoyed talking to him. Someone I wanted to meet for a long time. Appreciate his work. I'll put a link in the description to where you can purchase his books at Lulu. Okay. He's got plenty of books there. Highly recommend them all. They're great books. There's a few even I don't have yet that I hopefully will get in the future. Again, I'll be in New York next week teaching seminars for a week. Hope to see some of you there. Please click that like, share, subscribe button. Consider becoming a member. And I think next week we're going to have Pat McCarthy again talking about his new Motobu book. Okay, his revised edition of the Motobu Choki book. All right. So appreciate you all. Thanks again for all the support. And I'll see you in the next podcast. Take care.